Hi everyone, this is Charlotte and Jenny from the Bursary Foundation.
Everyone.
So we're enjoying a beautiful sunny day here in Manchester. It's about 30 degrees, but we are inside recording this video to you just because we think that shape nets are the most fun thing in the world.
I sense a little bit of sarcasm in your voice, Charlotte.
I don't know about you, Jenny, but I really don't like these very much.
They're really tricky,
Yeah,
really difficult.
you're probably
Yeah.
going to have to help me a little bit here because I just find these hard. I
We'll
don't.
work through it together, but
Thank
they
you.
are really tough. So if you find these scary, you're not alone.
Mm-hmm. You know, if you find these hard, everyone else finds these hard as well, including the adults. So
Yeah.
don't get too worried about these.
No.
So I've been thinking really hard about the tricks that I use to work this out when teaching. There's kind of three rules that I like to remember. Jenny, if you can think of any others that are really helpful, then let me know. So, rule number one is that if a side is opposite, it can't possibly be next to each other in a cube. So if you see a group of three cubes, I'll give an example by drawing some out. So if you see something that looks a bit like this, we couldn't possibly have two yellow squares next to each other here because they would be opposites. Or we couldn't have two of these light green squares next to each other because there should be something between them. So, for instance, if this dark green square is on the front of the cube, this one's going to be on the back of the cube, and thus you wouldn't see it in this net that's being created here. So that's a really, really important rule. You might also, if you remember different shapes of cube nets generally, come across, for instance, things like this. Exactly the same rule applies. These two light green ones are always going to be opposites on either side of the shape, no matter what. So that's my first top tip for how I try and work these out. The second one is thinking about something called rotational symmetry. All we mean by that is when you rotate a shape, it stays the same, it just changes by moving in different directions. So for instance, I've used rotation to show where this B would go if we imagined it in different places. So if I moved it so that the B was in this direction, what that means is the top side of the letter B would be attached to this side of the letter A, so it's going to look something like this at the end of it. If I have the B moving 90 degrees in the other direction, we can see that the bottom side of the B here is going to be attached to this side of the plus, which is what we get down in this third shape. And if we rotate it 180 degrees to get all the way down to the exclamation mark, we'll end up with something that looks like this on the bottom. So if, for instance, you had a net shown to you that had three squares that look like this, the B being upside down wouldn't necessarily mean that that net is wrong. You've got to think about if the B was moved next to the exclamation mark, would it be correct that it's been rotated that many degrees, essentially? What do you think of that as a tactic, Jenny?
Not working for me.
No, fair enough.
Sorry.
No, that's fair.
I think it's a very, very personal thing, and it's just how
Yeah.
your brain works. This is confusing me. The first tip I found really helpful.
That's fair. And different people's brains understand these shape problems in different ways. So I find that I can imagine the rotation if I'm really careful about it.
Yeah.
Not everyone will. Some people will find that thinking about rotation doesn't help for them. If you do, great. If you don't, then just don't worry about it too much.
I think thinking about what's next to each other, what's touching, that's definitely helpful.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So for instance, we can see here that the kind of ampersand figure and the B are next to each other and the straight side of the B is next to the ampersand. So that's a really good way of thinking about things like that as well. I agree with that one for sure. That's helpful. The other thing we could consider, and that's really important to remember, is that the top of the cube, if you folded all of that up, it would technically connect to the bottom of the cube here as well. So I've shown how these squares could move about down in the bottom two diagrams here. So for instance, the exclamation mark, if we folded it in a different way, actually goes on top of the A, and the dot would be towards the point of the A, which is using that kind of directional knowledge that you were talking about, Jenny. Similarly, if we moved the A down to the bottom, we can see that the A is now joining on to the point of the exclamation mark. So they're connected in the same way, we're just moving them in two slightly different directions. And when you like using things like the direction and the position of the shapes in relation to each other, this is really, really helpful, I find, because that means you're not going to accidentally cross something out that could technically be correct. The other way of doing things is, if you're struggling to just picture it in your head or visualize it, draw it out. This is one of the things that I found most helpful if you start off with a cube and you're trying to connect it over to a section of a grid. You're basically looking at this and thinking to yourself, if I unfolded this, where are the different shapes going to end up? So there's a number of different ways you could unfold it. I've drawn two of them down here. So if I imagine that the star is connected to the P, and then the P is connected to the T, so we'd have something that goes together like that, and then like that. The star is going to be on top of the P, and the P and the T are going to be next to each other. I can also see that the P and the T are in the same direction, so the two tops of the shapes and the two bottoms of the shapes are facing the same way. I might also think about it as, for instance, well, what if the T connected to the star, and what if the star connected to the P? So it would unfold in this direction rather than in the L shape. So this is another directional way of thinking about it, because I can say, well, this long top side of the T has to connect over to this star as well. There's not a gap between them. They've got to face in this direction. And then I can say, well, the star also has to be facing towards the top of the P as well. Does that make sense to you? So that one is obviously far better for the way your brain works. Whereas for me, I'm looking at the rotation saying, oh yeah, I can see if I rotate it 90 degrees this way or that way, I can visualize what's going on here.
It just depends how your brain works, doesn't it?
Find the way that works best for your brain. Have the others in the background just in case your usual method isn't working for you. But everyone will have a slightly different way of working these. These are just the ones that we like. So if we have a look at a question that involves our same square here again then. So which of the nets matches the cube on the left-hand side? We've got a little fella in the background here who's not looking very happy about this at all as well. So I know, thinking about the rules of my cube, that these shapes can't be stacked on top of each other at all. That can't be the case. So if anything looks like that at all, we can immediately discount it. I'm also going to remember the shapes that I've drawn out previously and use that to help me out. So what I'd be doing at this point is going through one by one and checking whether it could possibly work and getting rid of anything extra.
So let's go through it then. So it could be we've got the star on top of the P next to the T.
So that looks a bit like this one up here. So that's a possibility.
That's a possibility. B, the star is underneath the P.
So can that be correct then?
No, because the star, even if it had flipped upside down, the round bit of the P would be next to the star, not the flat bit.
So B's no good for us then.
So C, the T is just in the wrong position, isn't it?
Yeah, we said that they've got to
Yeah.
face in the same direction and they're not here.
Yeah, and they're adjacent to each. Yeah, no. So the D, star on top of the P next to the T. Okay, but the P is the wrong way round.
So
So it
that's
can't
no
be.
good.
C, star, if we connected it like we saw in the first example, on top of the P.
So that would go up here then, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Something like this, I'd then literally draw out and say, does that look right?
No, because again, it's the round bit of the P that should be next to the star, so it's A.
Yeah, so A's got to be our answer here. Some of these you'll find there's more possible answers because sometimes the way they lay things out makes it a bit trickier. So you might find there's 2 final options and then you need another step. For this one, there's only the one possible option.
Okay.
But check
That's
through
helpful.
every single one of them. This isn't like with some of the non-verbal when once you found it, move on. You need to check to make sure everything is in the right place with these ones because they can be a bit tricksy. All right, so are you ready to have a go at another one of these?
Yep.
Okay, let's do it. All right, so next one then, circle the net, which could make the cube shown again on the left-hand side. So what I'm going to do is draw out some of my possible nets if I unfolded this before I get going with identifying this lot, because I can see there's a lot of possible connections. I can see there's one over here. I can see, you know, the Q with the heart, and there's the percentage mark over here. So would that even bend round in the correct way? It's all a bit confusing. So if I look at this one, I'm going to say, for this first bit here, I'm going to use the heart as though that's the bottom corner here. So I'm just going to quickly draw that there. And then if the heart connected onto the percentage, so I'm going to have the percentage mark aiming towards this bottom corner and going up like this. And then if I've got the Q next to the heart, I can see that the stick of this Q shape is aiming in the opposite direction to it. So it's going to unfold to look something like that.
Yeah.
If I used it so I've got the Q that's in the corner shape here, so I draw that one like this, that would connect round to the heart in exactly the same way that we've seen before. So we know that's something that's really consistent. But then if the Q folded up towards the percentage mark, I can see that on the bottom side linking to the Q here, the diagonal goes up in the other direction. So it would look something like this. So that's well worth thinking about because it shows us how the direction a shape could point might change depending on what you think of as being the corner shape. But it also shows us something that has to be consistent, which is the position of the heart and the Q in relation to each other.
Okay, so should we go through them then?
Yeah, so A.
A, the heart is next to the Q.
Is the Q pointing the right way?
Q is not pointing the right way, so it can't be that one.
So this one, it would be really easy to think, oh, the Q's next to the heart, that's fine. But we can see that this pointy bit in none of our diagrams can go towards the heart, so that's got to be incorrect.
Yeah. Next one, they're stacked on top of each other, so that's not possible. Next one, so the Q is on top of the heart, which isn't possible. No, can't be that one. Next one, the Q is next to the heart and it's in the right direction. And the percentage sign, no, but hang on. The percentage sign, if it was connected, would be above the star. So no.
We can also say, I know that this square and this square would be opposite to each other if we folded it up.
Yeah, it's not possible.
So that one isn't possible. So it's got to be.
So let's just check. The Q is on top. The Q is underneath the percentage sign with them both going in the right direction, and heart is on the left. Yeah. So that exercise at the beginning was really helpful to work that out, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. some of these you might find that you can see them quite quickly and easily. So some of you might have looked at this and gone, oh, I can see that this one matches perfectly to what's going on over on the cube there. Some of you might need to unfold it and draw it out, and then you can look through and see if something matches what you've drawn. Other times you might need to go through and do what we've done and say, no, that can't be right, that can't be, that can be, and so on.
Yeah.
All right, so the very last one that I've got for us then is a bit of a trickier one because it's going in the opposite direction. I think I actually hate these even more than the usual cube.
Yeah, difficult.
They're grim. They are really grim.
Yeah.
So what I would do here is essentially think about, well, if I unfold some of these different cubes down the bottom here, could they be possible? So
let's have a look at A then. So if we open that up, the arrow would be next to the sunshine, which it could be on the net.
Yeah.
And the rectangle will be above the sunshine. So that's a possibility.
So let's draw that out super quickly. I'm doing it really roughly here. You don't have to do it any better than this, although I will draw it the other way because that's the way Jenny visualized it there. So we know we've got sunshine. We know we've got the arrow and we've got the rectangle. Okay. So this looks a little bit like something we've got up here, doesn't it? Because I can see that I've got the arrow, the rectangle, and the sunshine all fairly close to each other. So that's a possibility then. How about for shape B?
So B isn't possible because the cross is on top of the arrow, and that's impossible.
Yeah, because there's
the lightning there and the rectangle in between, so it can't be B.
Yeah.
C, we've got the arrow next to the lightning.
So what I had to do at this point then is say, well, this lightning here connects to this piece of lightning here. So I'm trying to visualize something on the bottom of the shape connecting to the top of the shape. So I'm literally just going to draw that up here.
Yeah.
So if I did that and I've got my lightning coming out the side.
Yeah, so that's not possible, is it? Because they're next to each. Oh, hang on. Well, it's going the wrong direction.
Yeah, so they can be next to each other, but here I've got the flat side of the lightning facing the arrow, whereas here they're kind of going across. They're perpendicular essentially, aren't they? So that can't be right. So D, what do we think for that one?
D, so we've got the arrow on top of the sunshine. So it's definitely either A or D, isn't it? So let's work out which one it has to be.
Yeah. So I actually found this one really tricky. I'm not going to lie, it took me a good few minutes of looking at this to work it out.
Yeah.
So how did you work it out, Jenny? Or how would you go about it?
So I'm imagining the net built up into a cube, and then, I mean, this is very difficult to explain, but I'm flipping it around so the sunshine is facing me.
So let's kind of draw that out as the cube then, potentially.
Yeah. So if I built it up, the sunshine is going onto the side, but then I'm turning it so the sunshine is in front of me. Yeah. Then on the top would be the rectangle.
Yeah, because I've taken this bit and I'm saying, well, that's on the top now.
Yeah, so the rectangle's on top. And then on the right-hand side would be the arrow, and it would be front to back.
Yeah, so the arrow is going to be pointing towards the sun, isn't it? Because this side would go here. This is
Which looks exactly like A, not D.
Yeah. This is almost where that rotational symmetry comes into an extent, isn't it? Because you've not necessarily thought of it as, oh, I'm going to think about the rotational symmetry.
Yeah.
But you have actually used that skill there to say, well, that arrow, if we rotated the shape around, is going to face towards the sun.
Exactly. Yeah, so really tricky, that one. And I would really recommend everyone, while they're at home, to actually draw it out and cut it out and have a play around with that one.
The more that you physically look at these things and pull them apart, the easier it is to start actually visualizing it in your brain. We ended up not using the grid that I set out for my way of doing it. Jenny, I think yours was actually better, because I was starting by saying, well, if I imagine that this arrow goes in this corner, where does everything else end up?
Yeah, it's more, for me, that's more hard visualizing to do, whereas yeah.
So I was able to say, well, this arrow would point towards the sunshine, and then the rectangle is going to end up below, which is kind of like what we ended up drawing in this bit. But I think your way was actually much speedier, which shows that your method of doing it rather than mine actually worked better for this particular instance.
Depends on the question, really.
Yeah, it really does. It's all about having a lot of flexibility for this one.
Yeah. But definitely have some practice, like touching these things. So if you've got a dice, maybe you've got one of those giant dice, to put some Post-its on, have a play around with it. Post-its are brilliant practice for this, because if you've got any cube or cuboid, you can put a Post-it on each face of it, and then practice making different nets and do quizzes and things with your parents or brothers and sisters. Yeah.
Definitely. Or even things like, the kind of boxes that you get for that tea and stuff comes in. You can take those apart and draw that out, because that will make you the
cereal boxes, even though they're not cubes. Have a play around with it. Yeah,
definitely.
Okay.
All right. Well, I feel like I get this one slightly better than I actually did when I was originally putting this together. So that makes me feel a bit better.
Yeah, it's practice, isn't it? I suppose as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
All right, everyone. Well, let us know how you get on with these. If you think that you need more videos covering cube nets and lots of different cube questions, give us a message via YouTube, or you can email us, and we will put together some more for you. In the meantime, we're going to be
Good luck.
Yep, we're going to be putting up an English video as well this week, so you can enjoy that one too. See you all soon.
Bye.